So in times like this, I go back to what my father told me, who was a college professor for 36 years. And he said, always asked me, do you know what your primary responsibility is as a presenter in front of a group? And I would always think and try to understand what that was. And he was very functional. He said, to keep the audience awake, right? He said, because if they're falling asleep, you'll never be able to get anywhere with them. And considering that this is an after the lunch session, I think I'm swimming uphill. So I'm going to first ask you a quick question. I know that everyone will be able to answer this. And that is, who spends more than 50% of their purchases on Amazon? More than 50%. Wow, that's a low number. Anybody Amazon Prime customers? Okay, a lot more. Very good. That's what I figured. That gives you a good position in terms of who the audience is and really what reality is. So we're here to talk about data. And it's a very dry and boring subject. When you do these presentations, you sit down and try to write something interesting, but it isn't until you hear all the other presenters that you really sort of get some perspective. And there's some great examples that we heard yesterday and today about people are really using technology, understanding what the data is, and using it to their advantage. Now, as to whether that translates all the way up the supply chain and back down or not, I don't know, we'll see. So as it relates to data, I always like to talk about what is the data source. So here's the data source, me. A bachelor in economics, master's in business, trade, retail, wholesale, technology, training in retail wholesale, experience 15 years in the retail industry in various roles, 20 years in consulting. Perspective, right? This is the most important thing because this is something you may not get from the exact words on the page. I'm a cynic, right? And I'm a cynic because I have battle scars of helping retailers and manufacturers trying to implement technology in their organization. And the two primary things that makes that more difficult than not is culture and data, right? We all talked about how wonderful data is. You can move it across the organization. But in reality, that's not a picture of reality. It's not that easy, and many organizations are using technology as an agent of change to try to achieve that, and their initial perspective on with what they're going to achieve is really misguided. So let's talk about data on a global standpoint. So I like this slide because it talks about this is data, what kind of data is being created every minute, right? Some good ones on there. Amazon, there are 1,111 packages shipped every minute. My favorite one is the Weather Channel. 18 million requests are made every minute. I mean, that's a staggering number. We all do it, right? We all stand there and open up our phones and say what the weather's going to be like. But that's an interesting statistic. So that's 2018. So as to whether it's different from 2019 or not, only time will tell. So there's some really interesting statistics, and you guys can get a copy of this when it's done after the show. Okay, so I like this slide because it talks about, we're going to talk about 8 major subjects, and we're going to go through this really quickly because we want to get to the part where I get cynical. What's really interesting about this is that it's called big data, and we don't really use that term anymore, right? That was a term from like 2 years ago. Like we're past that. We're on to AI, right? And AI assumes that you have big data, but nobody uses that. Once again, part of the cynicism that we keep talking about all these things that are out there that are fundamentally going to change the way we do business that are really not tangible. It's not touchable. So let's go through this really quickly. This is pretty interesting. Talks about the 3 major sources of data: streaming data, social media data, and publicly available sources. You'd think that with all the types of data that's available and is out there, it would be an unlimited number. And I like this slide. This is from the SAS group, who's really one of the industry leaders in really understanding the power of data, how they break it into 3 groups, right? Next one. This is a staggering one. Only 12% of data is being analyzed, okay? Now, this is 2018 data, and we'd like to think with all the AI and all that other stuff that it's a much larger number. I'd like to think that this is not true. I'm cynical, right? I'm hoping that the retail and manufacturing industry is spending more than 12% of their time looking at their data. Next one, Hadoop, right? Does anyone know what Hadoop is? Anybody, what's Hadoop? I'll tell you what Hadoop is. Hadoop is an animal in an Indian children's book, right? That's what Hadoop is. But more importantly, what it is a new way of looking at data that far outstrips the traditional methods. So rather than thinking about a database, it's really a database platform where more and more data can be linked together and really not only multiply the power of data, but actually increase it exponentially. It's a real thing. Next, I love this one too. Retailers could increase their operating margin by 60%. Who believes that's true, right? I mean, most of the people in the retail industry are trying to squeak out, they're trying to go from, a 3% EBITDA to a 3.2% EBITDA. That's not a 60% increase, right? So once again, interesting statistic, I'm highly skeptical. This one, 1.7 megabytes of information is being created every second in the year 2020, all right? So I don't know about you guys, but I think my watch has about 1.2 megabytes in it, right? My first computer was an IBM PS2 System 30, that's 64K of memory, right? So when you talk about this kind of exponential increase in the volume of data, you start to see that all of the things that we're talking about sort of pale in comparison to the overall amount of data that's in the world today. This is a crazy one. I had to look up what is a zettabyte, right? It's beyond a boatload. I think it's a shipload squared, right? But it's a staggering amount, and we all know that most of that's going to be in Amazon Web Services anyway. So who cares what the number is and what the name is? And then this is an important one. We talked a little bit about this today, and that is the emergence of Internet of Things, right? So the Internet of Things, although IBM sort of tried to market it as their concept, is really about the myriad of explosive amounts of sensors that there's going to be in the world, right? We saw an example this morning when we're driving in the Tesla, and it's sensing all of these different things going on. It's the number of devices and the amount of data that they're going to generate is going to be beyond comprehension, right? So that complicates what the world is going to be and how we're, as retail and manufacturer, we're going to be able to take advantage of it. So now we'll get down to brass tacks. So let's talk about data. Two kinds of data, structured data and unstructured data. Structured data, and this is within a wholesale retail environment, two primary types of structured data that are really most important, product data and customer data, right? And guess what? We're really bad at both of these, right? Product data, how many customers have I been in, and people who have spent a lot of time in retailers, they go and take a look at a selling report, and they're looking across all the styles, and here's a basic shirt, and it comes in 10 different colors, but the page is this long. And why is that? Because there's BLACK, there's BLK, there's BLA. I kid you not, I was at a retailer, and they have the color BLAQUE, black, right? So what this is evidence of the fact that there is no discipline in retailers. And I'm not going to blame this on the manufacturers, but they're not a contributor, they're not as guilt-free, and they're not contributing to the fact that without really good data, you can't really understand what the customer wants. So the question is, how well is black selling, right? You can't really tell. And it's a very common problem across many retailers today. Second one, customer data, right? So most retailers today that maybe they even have three, they have stores, they're selling online. You go into a store, they take your information, John Smith, 123 Main Street, that piece of data, the transaction goes in their point of sale system. Great. That may also have a loyalty system. And guess what? When John Smith from 123 Main Street signed up, he said John A. Smith. So in the same retailer, there are two John Smith, same guy. And then John goes on and buys some underwear on the web, right? And he puts J. Smith, right? Three guys, right? Is really one guy, right? He's got three records. And the fact of the matter is all this predictive technology that's out there is pretty much, I won't say useless, but the power of it is tremendously diffused by the fact that the quality data is very, very poor. So the good news is we have a lot more industry-generated standards. The UCC Council from the National Retail Federation has standard colors. Retailers still don't use them. There is no standardization for customers today, what we refer to as a CGR, Customer Golden Record, that you know one customer and all their permutations of where they live and where they buy. How can you measure the total lifetime value of a customer if they have multiple customer records? And retailers today are just not spending any time and effort and energy and resources. It takes money to go through and clean those things up. And the fact of the matter is that manufacturers today who are now selling directly to customers and or selling on Amazon are facing the same challenges. So the fact of the matter is the quality of data is not good. Now we'll talk about unstructured data, right? So then within unstructured data, there's data within their domain and data outside the domain. Data within the domain is John Smith goes onto the website and he's clicking around, he's searching, do I want black underwear or white underwear? Do I want women's underwear? Whatever it might be. And that is data, that's structured data with unstructured data within the domain. So the retailer can actually see John Smith went on and searched for this, and they can see the patterns, right? So that's valuable data. The challenge is that there's unstructured data, right? And unconfined data. And that is there's social listening and influencers. And the fact of the matter is how do you figure out whether your customers are susceptible to that or participating in it? The fact of the matter is without the golden customer record and really understanding who your customer is, you can't understand that. You can't figure that out. There's no way to cross-reference it. I'll give you an example. Retailers are trying to put in place a technology that when a customer walks into their store, they sense that there's they pick up your IP from your cell phone, and they send you an email that says, appreciate your being in the store today. We'll give you 15% off your first purchase. All you have to do is respond yes, and what happens is a message goes back to the home office, and then immediately what they do is get a virtual coupon, a digital coupon to their cell phone. Very sneaky, right? Very sneaky because they just picked up their email address, right? That's good stuff. But it's only good if you knew that John Smith was your customer to begin with, right? So what happens is there's a lot of disparate data in different places that the retailers have not been able to figure out how do I collect it all together and how do I make sense of it. Let's talk about why this occurs. The reason why it occurs is that particularly brick and mortar retailers didn't grow up in the digital age, right? They're buyers in many of these stores that have been buyers for 15, 20 years. They don't get it. They never have, and my prediction is they never will, versus their digital counterparts. And these are retailers who grew up in the digital age. They don't know anything other than the fact that all of their data is together in one place, right? They know exactly who their customers are. They know the only way they can get the customer to buy something is to describe it accurately, right? And with enough content and color and pictures and video to entice them to actually make that transaction. Because without that impetus, they'll never get to the point where they make the transaction. Most of the store native retailers today don't have that in their culture. And the impact of that is the fact they don't think that way. They think when they create an item, it doesn't make any difference whether it's BLACK or BLAQUE, right? They don't understand the power of that. They also don't understand the fact that in order to appropriately represent a product on the web, they have to have a full battery of methods of doing that description. So it's accurate description, it's not a single picture, but 12 or 15 pictures from different ways. It's now, many retailers today, and I'm sure you guys all do it, when you go to buy a pair of shoes on Zappos, right? You have somebody come in and you're watching the little video of the guy's shoes and he turns around and says, yeah, I like the way that looks, right? And that's because there's a culture of the digitally native retailers who have figured out that the only way they can really get a customer to buy stuff is to describe it appropriately. Now I'll spend a few minutes just talking about artificial intelligence. Now, there's been some discussion of artificial intelligence a little bit today, and I don't want to disparage any of the people who have talked about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a broad subject, right? it is an umbrella for many subjects underneath. And my cynical approach is that the truest sense of artificial intelligence does not exist, right? I think it's BS. What it is an umbrella of other activities and other disciplines underneath it, all that will provide a tremendous amount of promise to business and industry. But unfortunately, what has gone on in the retail and the wholesale industry, as long as I've been in it, is that the big software companies and the big consulting companies come up with a fancy term. My friend from SAP is looking, giving me the evil eye there. They come up with a term as if you adopt this, the business is going to change miraculously. I was with a CEO the other day, and he says, my phone's over there. He holds up his iPhone and says, "Why can't I get AI on my phone?" Right? I leave it out at night, and it charges, and if there are any updates, I get it. Why can't I get AI like that? And it's a scary thought that someone actually thinks that, right? The fact of the matter is that the way the industry has been talking within retail and wholesale is that if you have AI, the next day, after you've downloaded it to your phone, the next day, there's going to be a line of customers at your store waiting to get in, and thousands of additional clicks on your website because you have AI. And on top of that, you're going to be able to get rid of at least 50% of the people doing back office work in your building. That's what the industry thinks. And unfortunately, we're nowhere near that. Now, there are some good things. There's machine learning, and that's providing a tremendous opportunity for people to look at larger groups of data and apply these learnings to make things better and more efficient. I'm all about that. But artificial intelligence itself does not really exist in the rawest form. Now, I talked about retail and wholesale. This is not an industry-specific phenomenon. My wife works for a big insurance company, and their CEO announced to the street the other day, it's a publicly traded company, we're going to save $500 million in expenses over the next 5 years because we're going to replace underwriters with artificial intelligence. And my wife came home and said, "I need a glass of wine," right? Because we've been talking about this, that it really doesn't exist per se. And the fact of the matter is this is a great example because it applies in an outside industry, is that the reason why we'll never be able to replace the people within the organization is because they too are completely disjointed with all of their systems, and because of the fact their data quality is so disparate and there's so many different databases, it takes the people to figure out how to go to 7 different screens and put together a profile of a new customer who is looking for insurance coverage, right? And that's very much true in the retail industry and manufacturing as well, whereas over time, the pieces of technology that have been applied have not been conceived of with a strategy. And the net is there's lots of pieces of data, there's lots of databases, and our challenge is the fact is that it's all over the place. And we'll never be able to apply artificial intelligence, machine learning, or any of these other disciplines until all that data is together.